During Tesla's shareholder day event in mid-June, Elon Musk talked about the amazing potential for Tesla's full self-driving. But interestingly enough, he also noted the potential Achilles heel of Tesla's full self-driving and any other autonomous driving solution for that matter. And it turns out that the problem is that full self-driving could become actually too good to improve itself. But is there a solution? Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So I want to pull up a couple of quick clips from Tesla's Investor Day presentation. I was there in person. It was an amazing presentation, a lot of energy. Elon was a super happy guy that day, obviously, since he got the compensation package and official permission from the shareholders to move Tesla's incorporation from Delaware to Texas. But what I want to talk about today is specifically about full self-driving, and it comes kind of late in his speech. So first of all, as a small hors d'oeuvre, I want to talk about the differences between hardware 4, the current chips that are in Teslas today, and AI 5, which is hardware 5. They're renaming it AI 5, and how that actually might be fundamentally different than hardware 4 and hardware 3 before it.
Switching from hardware 5 to AI 5 will be in Optimus and in all cars in about 18 months. And it's really just a staggering amount of compute. And it's very power efficient compute. So it's got to be, because if you're in a mobile application like a humanoid robot or a car, you can't just be sucking down 10 kilowatts. Like you can in a data center. So you've got to be very power efficient. So the, sort of hardware 3 and 4 are only a few hundred watts. Yeah, this is hard. Now hardware 5 will be able to go probably up to about 700 or 800 watts.
By the way, I just have to pause it right there because there I am right at the edge of the frame. That is the back of my head, and Scott Walter is there next to me. So you can see proof that we were actually there.
Now hardware 5 will be able to go probably up to about 700 or 800 watts, but it'll power fluctuate contingent upon the complexity of the scene that it is in. So if it is in a parking lot stationary, it's like, you don't have to think very much, just like a person. Like if you're in a complicated traffic scenario, you've got to think a lot more than if you're just cruising along, on an empty road.
So the really interesting thing here is that AI 5 or hardware 5 will be able to go up to about 700 watts. I believe that hardware 4 is around 300, not exactly sure, but the power envelope is, on the order of 1/2 of what AI 5 is going to be. And you might be like, well, holy crap, that means this thing is going to chew through batteries and everything, especially in the Optimus form factor, because you don't have a very big battery for it. So it will use up a large percentage of the available battery. But the interesting part here is that it sounds like it's going to be smart enough to figure out when it needs to devote more energy for thought. So the important thing to note here is that a traditional computer, you kind of spin it up and it sort of operates at a baseline load or something along those lines. And then of course, if you ask it questions or make it do something hard, like you want to play a very complex video game or something like that, the GPU kicks in and goes from like a base load, which is really small. In fact, I'm actually looking at mine right now. It's actually fairly high right now because I'm recording this video. I'm playing a video back in the background. The computer is doing other things. So the GPU load is actually, somewhere around, I would guess around 25% right now. When I render out videos, it jumps up to 100%. So that's the kind of energy scaling that the computer will do. But of course, for a computer, I'm specifically telling it what I want it to do. I'm like, please render out this video. So it knows it's going to have to bump up the power to be able to do this. But the cool part is it sounds like hardware 5 is going to be able to look out into the world and make its own decisions about how much power it needs to use. Now, I don't know if hardware 4 can do this, or at least do it very efficiently at this point. But from what Elon just said, AI 5 is going to be able to scale itself. So it will be able to go into kind of a rest mode where it's like, it's driving down a country road. It's a sunny day. There's no other traffic. It's a straight line. No big deal. It can kind of go into low power mode, and it cannot be using a lot of compute to be able to do that kind of driving. But then when it gets to a complex 5-point intersection with lights and stop signs and all sorts of crazy things, then it can bump that compute up when it needs to in order to solve the more complex problems. And that, of course, as Elon said, is just the way humans do. When you're driving normally, you don't really spend a lot of conscious thought thinking about your driving. You're just driving along. But when things get complicated, you actually devote, more mental energy, some conscious energy trying to figure out what's going on and to make sure you don't screw up. So it sounds like AI 5 will be allowed to act analogously and will understand situations where it has to ramp up power versus ramping it down. Now, again, whether hardware 3 and hardware 4 do this already to some extent, I think that they do. I'm sure there's kind of a baseline load, but it just may not be very efficient about it. It might be operating at close to maximum whenever you have full self-driving engaged. So anyway, as hardware 5 comes out, it will be very interesting to see what kind of power envelope it operates within. Recently, I've taken up pickleball with the family, and keeping up with my kids means it's even more important than ever to be intentional about feeling healthy and young. That's where AG1, today's sponsor, comes in. AG1 is foundational nutrition that helps me maintain a healthy lifestyle and to keep doing what I love to do, including fun times on the court. Between cutting out processed sugar and drinking AG1 daily, I can honestly say I feel years younger. I've lost weight, my joints don't ache, and I have so much more energy than I did before, which is great for daily activities, not to mention special events. AG1 is foundational nutrition that provides your body with what you might be missing. AG1 is a science-driven formulation of 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, probiotics, and adaptogens. AG1 gives you the foundational nutrition your body craves, and the probiotics and prebiotics help keep my digestive system staying regular no matter what I throw at it. AG1 is constantly putting their formula to the test. AG1 is backed by multiple research studies, and the results are amazing. In just 30 days, 97% of participants in one research study said they had more energy, and at 60 days, 82% of participants in a research study said they felt less stressed. AG1 is science-based nutrition to help you get the most out of your day every day. So be sure to go to drinkag1.com/drknowitall to get your free welcome kit that includes a canister, a shaker, a year's supply of vitamin D3 and K2, and 5 extra travel packs of AG1. This and your choice of daily activity will be the best thing you can do to better your health. Thanks again to AG1 for sponsoring today's video, and thank you for watching. Be sure to click my link to get your free welcome kit, and now let's get back to it. All right, and speaking of Tesla's full self-driving getting really good, now we get to the crux of the matter. Elon talks about miles per intervention and how that's actually a major stumbling block for Tesla.
We also are no longer compute constrained for training. So I check in with the team. It's like, is there anything we could do to improve the pace of progress with respect to training and inference? Currently, that is not the limiting factor. In fact, the limiting factor right now is that the amount of miles between interventions is so long that it takes quite a while to figure out which version is better than the other version, because none of them are requiring any interventions. So it's like, you know, if you start getting to like thousands of miles between interventions, or you're like 10,000 miles to get an intervention, then like, well, the average person only drives about 10,000 miles in a year. And if it's in an urban environment and the average speed is 20 miles an hour, I mean, so our professional test drivers get pretty bored, frankly. You know, they're like, okay, I drove all week and there was no intervention. Like the highlight of the week would be like, yes, an intervention, finally. It's like getting to that point. So this is where actually having a giant fleet is extremely important, because we can deploy a new FSD model and run it in shadow mode and see how well it performs. You know, compare how the human drives the car versus the new self-driving build, and then analyze that delta in shadow mode, like the shadow knows, or doesn't know, as the case may be, and then be able to assess by getting billions of miles very quickly with the giant fleet. Like that, basically, that data engine is incredibly helpful. Like actually, it's not possible to solve the self-driving problem without having millions of vehicles on the road. So that's actually is like figuring out clever ways to test how good the next build, FSD build, is actually the limiting factor right now. And then, of course, like I said, we are building another training data center right here, which will be dedicated to hardware 4 training. So we'll bifurcate hardware 3 and hardware 4 training later this year. We'll keep improving hardware 3, but we're going to uncork the full capability of hardware 4 as well.
All right, so a lot to unpack there. Number one is that hardware 4, of course, is still operating in emulation mode of hardware 3. As soon as the gigantic data center gets built, and by the way, I did a big thing about the fans and the cooling and all that stuff about the data center. You can check that out if you're interested. But once that gets built in the Texas Gigafactory, they will actually bifurcate and do hardware 4 training on its own. That should allow hardware 4 vehicles like our Model Y to eventually get substantially better than hardware 3 vehicles. But of course, the really interesting part about this is Elon is saying that they're getting to be so few safety critical interventions. Now, I will say that I tend to intervene. I just went to the gym and back again this morning. I intervened a few times and it was for my convenience because I wanted to drive faster or go into another lane or something like that. Not a safety critical intervention. The car would have gotten me home perfectly fine. But at least in some areas of the country, it sounds like safety critical interventions are getting to be so few and so far in between, like on the order of 1,000 miles to 10,000 miles, that it actually becomes difficult to collect the data in order to make improvements. And then along those lines, Elon revealed a couple of other things. Number one is that they release multiple different versions of each version of the software, not necessarily that us consumers can use, but in shadow mode. So shadow mode is a mode where the car is making decisions in its mind. It's like thinking what the right answer is and then looking at what the human being does instead. And what he calls the delta, it takes the difference between what the human does and what it wants to do, and it decides on whether that is a good decision or not. And then in aggregate over your entire drive and many, many, many people's entire drives, it determines whether that is a good model or not compared to another model. So let's just say simply they have A/B testing. They have two models. They have Model A, Model B. They put Model A in shadow mode in half of the vehicles. They put Model B in shadow mode in the other half, run it around for a month or something like that, probably a week or two. Anyway, they collect the data from that and they try to figure out which one of those models is better, which one is the better candidate of the training runs in order to know which one to pursue and which one to attempt to roll out. The problem is Elon is saying that they have so few miles between interventions, safety critical ones at least, that they don't know anymore. They're like, we don't know which one is the better answer. We can't tell. And so basically Tesla having this gigantic fleet of, millions and millions of vehicles out on the road means that they're at least able to make an attempt at that. If they place the software in millions of vehicles, they can actually make a reasonable attempt at gathering enough data to see which one is better. But every time you go an order of magnitude fewer interventions, you need an order of magnitude more data, which makes it more difficult to test. So this is actually a significant problem. Tesla Full Self-Driving really does become its own worst enemy because it's getting so good that it's difficult to know which version of the software is better. And while Elon doesn't talk about this, I will add to this that eventually humans are going to be the limiting factor as well. We are not perfect drivers by any means. We are in fact rather mediocre drivers. That's the reason why so many accidents happen and so many bad things happen. So the goal is for the car to become a better driver than humans. And this, of course, takes us back to Google DeepMind in the mid-2010s when they created AlphaGo, which was based on the best Go players in the world, and it got really good and it was actually able to win. But then they created AlphaZero, which unleashed the program from human games and allowed it to play itself over and over and over again millions of times. And it now has an ELO rating. I believe the best human is around 3,600. It has an ELO rating of about 5,200. So it's better than the best human that has ever lived. So it's way better than that. But what that means is eventually you're not going to be able to use the human driver as the ground truth. We are not good enough to be able to drive that well. Even the best drivers aren't going to be able to do that. So Tesla is going to have to gamify this somehow and allow the car in simulation or some other manner, maybe in shadow mode versus itself with hardware 4. I don't know if there's enough memory to do that, but I could see an A/B test internally inside the vehicle going on while you're driving, and it's checking which one of those solutions is best and then determining what it thinks is the best answer without taking the human into account. Or much more easily, they could do simulation, but simulation is not perfect, where you could run millions and millions and millions of simulations of the drives and you could see which one performs better. But it sounds like right now the number of miles between safety critical interventions is a serious limiting factor, and very, very soon we human beings, if not already, are the limiting factor. You can't consider us the ground truth anymore. So we have an utterly fascinating situation where we need so many nines, right? We need 99.99999 something percent accuracy in the drive. It can never make a mistake except one in like a million or 100 million or a billion miles. That would be the goal, that it would only make that kind of level of mistake. But when you try to get to that, it's way better than human beings. Human beings don't drive anything close to that many miles before having an accident on average. And even the best drivers could get involved in an accident or something. So eventually are going to have to unleash Tesla's full self-driving from humanity. It's going to have to create its own ground truth. It's going to have to figure out what the best answer for driving is, and it's going to have to use that answer. And the really intriguing part about this is, again, relative to the game of Go, human beings have actually started to learn from AlphaZero. They've actually started to figure out better ways to play the game of Go that no human being had ever figured out before. So likewise, what we could see is cars driving in a manner that is superhuman, that is better than the best human driver that has ever lived, and that human beings could learn from that. I don't know if we'd be able to learn from it necessarily, but at the very least, it will become very obvious that humans should not be allowed to drive on roads, and that you should have these things driving on the road instead, because it will be so much safer and will save so much injury and so many lives and all of that kind of stuff. So this is a really intriguing problem. Tesla's full self-driving has effectively gotten so good that it's difficult to improve it anymore, because we've got the March of Nines to a point where, number one, the interventions are so rare that it's difficult for Tesla to collect those, but they do have millions of cars on the road, so that's a help. But number two, eventually we're going to get to the point where human beings are just not adequate as the ground truth. And that's probably already happening. We're probably already getting to the point where the best human drivers are probably on par with Tesla's full self-driving, at least under the best circumstances. I know full self-driving still makes some idiotic mistakes because I see it once in a while, but it's getting pretty rare. And even if it's not as good as the best human drivers yet, let's say sometime in the next year or so, it will actually get as good as the best human drivers, or maybe even better, at which point it's going to have to come up with a different system to improve itself, because humans are no longer going to be good at giving it feedback for how good it is. So really intriguing stuff, right? Definitely let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. And while you're down there, if you don't mind liking and subscribing, it super helps out the channel. Thank you so much. And finally, a big thanks once again to AG1 for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to click my link in the description to get your free welcome kit, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.